Could we speak about the brain and the mind? There's a lot of it. I'll read it briefly twice, and I hope you will understand a rather long question. I haven't read it before. Could we speak about the brain and the mind? Thinking takes place materially in the brain cells. If thinking stops and there is perception without thought, what happens in the material brain? You seem to say, again, you seem to say, that the mind, has its place outside the brain. But where does the movement of pure perception take place, if not somewhere in the brain? And how is it possible for mutation to take place in the brain cells if pure perception has not connection in the brain? Have you understood the question? May I read it once more? It's a good question. So please listen to it. I'm listening to it too. Could we speak about the brain and the mind? Thinking takes place materially in the brain cells. That is, thinking is a material process. If thinking stops and there is perception without thought, what happens to the material brain? You seem to say that mind has its place outside the brain. But where does the movement of pure perception take place, if not somewhere in the brain? And how is it possible for mutation to take place in the brain cells if pure perception has not connection in the brain? Right. Have you got the question? So first he wants, the questioner says, differentiate, separate, distinguish and so on between the mind and the brain. And then he asks, if perception is purely outside the brain, which means thought is not the movement of perception. And he asks, if the perception takes place outside the brain, which is thinking process, remembering process, then what happens to the brain cells themselves, which are conditioned by the past? You follow? And will there be a mutation in the brain cells if perception is outside? Is this clear? Are you sure it's clear? So let's begin with the brain and the mind. The brain is a material function. It's a muscle, right? Like the heart, it has its, and the brain cells contain all memories. Please, I'm not a brain specialist, nor have I studied the experts, but I've lived a long time now, and I've watched a great deal. Not only the reaction of others, what they say, what they think, what they want to tell me, but also I've watched how the brain reacts. You follow? and so on. I won't go into what my brain is. That's unimportant. I know you would like that, but that's unimportant. So the brain has evolved through time, right? From the most single cell, taking millions and millions of years, till it reached the ape, and go on another million years till it could stand, and so ultimately the human brain. The human brain is contained within the cell, within the skull, right? It's there. But it can go beyond itself, right? You can sit here and think of your country or your home, you're instantly there, right? In thought, you're not physically, you're here, but instantly you're in your home or in your faraway country. The brain has extraordinary capacity, right? Technology, see what it has done. The most extraordinary things they are doing. If you ask some of them, and fortunately or unfortunately, I meet them very often, they tell me all about it. So the brain has extraordinary capacity. That brain has been conditioned, right? That's so. By the limitation of language, not the language itself, but the limitation of language. You understand the difference? I won't go into it. It has been conditioned by the climate it lives, by the food it eats, by the food, by the social environment, the society in which it lives, and that society has been created by the brain. So that society is not different from the activities of the brain. I hope you're following all this. And 1,000 million years of experience, right? Millions years of accumulated knowledge based on that experience, which is tradition. I am British, you are German, he's a Hindu, he's a black man, he's this, he's that. All the nationalistic division, which is tribal division, right? And the religious conditioning. So the brain is conditioned, right? And being conditioned, it is limited. The brain has extraordinary capacity, but it has been made, it has been conditioned and therefore limited, right? It is not limited in the technological world, right? Computers and so on. But it is very, very limited with regard to the psyche. Nobody, people have said, know yourself, from the Greeks, from the ancient Hindus and so on. They study the psyche in another. You understand? But they never study the psyche of themselves. The psychologists, the philosophers, the experts, they never study themselves. They study the rats, the rabbits, the pigeons, the monkeys, and so on, so on, so on. But they never say, I'm going to look at myself. I'm ambitious, I'm greedy, I'm envious. I compete with my neighbor, with my other scientists. I want better. You follow? It's the same psyche that has existed for thousands of years, though technologically you're a marvelous outside person. You understand? So inwardly we are very primitive. Right? So, the brain is limited, primitive, made in the world of the psyche. Now, can that limitation be broken down? You understand my question? Can that limitation, which is the self, the ego, the me, the self-centered concern, can all that be wiped away? Which means the brain then is unconditioned. You understand what I'm saying? Then it has no fear. Now most of us live in fear. Most of us are anxious, frightened of what's going to happen, frightened of death, all the rest of it. Dozen things. Anxious. Can all that be completely be wiped away and be fresh? You understand? So that the brain is free. Then its relationship to the mind is entirely different.